Hello and welcome to the In Gaming Podcast, where I, Hardiman, along with my good friend and co-host Destino Will, talk all things video games. You can catch us at 7 p.m. UK time every Tuesday on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify with a brand new episode.
We love to hear from our listeners, so please give us a shout with any questions, feedback, or suggestions, either in the comment section on YouTube or over on Twitter at In Gaming Podcast.
If you do enjoy today's show, then please like, subscribe, and share the podcast.
Without further ado, let's take a look at what's been going on this week in gaming.
So, I've been on holiday over the past week, just up in Northumberland. It has meant that I haven't been able to spend a lot of time with games over the past week, but I did get two new titles. So I did fold and get hold of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, and I also, coming back off holiday, thanks to some vouchers for the PlayStation Store, grabbed hold of the Skywalker Saga as well. And I have had the chance to play a few hours with both, so I just thought I'd give my first impressions of both titles. So we'll start with Tiny Tina's. First impressions are really good. Now, I've always had a bit of a kind of back and forth pass with the Borderlands series, because I have played every one of them, including the pre-sequel, Borderlands 2, obviously the original Borderlands, and then Borderlands 3. But I have felt that over time, it lost its self-aware comedic appeal, or some might say it became too self-aware, and that kind of led to its comedy being a little bit hard to take at times. You know, you might say it, cringy in places, and I think Borderlands 3 really got to that point. It very much had this sort of infusion of age-old internet culture and internet memes, this kind of story with two kind of edgy main characters with undercuts, and it became a little bit like difficult to kind of swallow a lot of the comedy. It was very, very on the nose, and it got to the point where the Borderlands game, like the series, kind of became too self-aware of its own comedy, and that kind of led to it being pretty kind of challenging to kind of get through, especially considering the voice elements, narrative elements are quite a key component of the Borderlands games alongside the gameplay. And I did feel that the gameplay in Borderlands 3 was really good. It had that kind of classic Borderlands, pick up a gun, you don't know what you're going to get. Some of them just might be out of this world, crazy, wacky combinations of weapons. And so the gameplay was very much Borderlands, very much enjoyable. But I think when mixed with the narrative, I just couldn't make it beyond kind of a few hours, should I say. I mean, no, it has been. I'm pretty sure Borderlands did come out a few years ago now, and I'm sure I bought it around launch, and I've still not got round to playing more than a few hours of it. I think the challenges it came up against are sort of the challenges of long-term development. And so what that means is that the comedy and the narrative it's relying on is from a period of time that in internet terms, would be a complete age ago. And so it just didn't really kind of, jive with maybe where internet culture and memes were at the time. Now, Tiny Tina's, on the other hand, does a much better job of this. The narrative so far I have really enjoyed. You've got, obviously, Tiny Tina herself as a character, not to bring in the Marmite cliche, but you very much do either love her or you hate her character, because it's so exaggerated. As in terms of the voice acting, in terms of kind of the character animation. So if you didn't jive with her in the Assault on Dragon Keep expansion, then you're probably not going to this time. But I so far really enjoyed her dialogue and her narrative. Add to the fact that you also have people like Will Arnett and Andy Samberg playing main characters in the story as well. That kind of adds a very that star-studded cast obviously improves the game's narrative greatly, because they are voices that you recognize playing these comedic kind of Dungeons and Dragons characters. So the narrative so far has been really good, because it's a lot of nods to kind of classic D&D culture, to classic tabletop RPG and board game culture. There's a lot of things that feel more relevant than maybe the comedy did in Borderlands 3, because it's more of a kind of throwback rather than trying to tap into what's current, just because of the theme of the game. So I so far have found the narrative really enjoyable, very funny, very charming as well. I think there's a character in the game called Queen Butt Stallion, which is quite a good character within the game. I won't spoil anything more than their name, but I have really enjoyed the characters so far. As far as the gameplay goes, it's if you took the Borderlands 3 gameplay and made a lot of the weapons like introduce kind of crossbows and kind of other forms of weaponry, but with that Borderlands twist. So they've got there might be a crossbow, but it's got like an ACOG sight on it, and like a kind of a burst fire mode and things like that. And you've got SMGs, you've got assault rifles, and they all obviously have their quirks, and design wise they've kind of got some medieval flair as well. But then you also have magic elements, so you'll have a single magic attack if you are I'm the Stabomancer, so you'll have so you've got so you've got a single magic attack, but then there's like a mage character as well, so they probably got more magic attacks, or some of their weapons are infused with magic, and you do like the mage might have weapons infused with magic. As a Stabomancer, you can get weapons that fire out freeze bullets or fire bullets or whatever it might be. So it's taking that Borderlands classic gameplay, putting kind of a medieval spin on it. Visually, I put it way above any of the Borderlands games. It is absolutely gorgeous. The colors are really kind of bright and vibrant, saturated. It's strange that in going back to kind of a more simplistic design of rolling hills and castles, which we as British people see on the way to the shops, obviously. In doing that, it is really, I think, jumped a step above any of the worlds in Borderlands did. It's just such a beautiful world, full of atmosphere, full of skeletons or skelly men that make humorous quips while they're being shot at and losing bones. So there's they did. Yeah, there are quite a number of humorous quips made by skeletons, and like zombie shotgunners and all sorts of these kind of wacky characters. So that combination has meant that I've really enjoyed it way more than probably any Borderlands since Borderlands 2. More than the pre-sequel, more than Borderlands 3 or kind of any of its expansions. And then not only have you got the more classic gameplay of kind of combat encounters where you'll take out a number of enemies and win some loot. You also have the overworld, which is more of a traditional kind of tabletop RPG where you've got kind of a small character, small kind of miniature representation of your character. They walk around the world.
It's kind of like the old, like how you'd have on Super Mario World or Crash Bandicoot, where you go from.
Yes, it's exactly like that. Yeah. So where you've got that overworld, and you walk between the different levels, and there are kind of funny elements in there as well, places to get loot, combat encounters, and there was a guy I met called, I think it was, what was he called? Backstab, but spelt BACHSTABB. And he was going on about being very paranoid that somebody was about to stab him in the back. So there's loads of these kind of like little charming elements to the game that I just think enrich it so much more than I think they were ever able to do with Borderlands 3. So I'm going to say that much like with, I think, Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a surprise at just how good a game it is. And I think in actual fact, playing down expectations of what it was going to be like has helped me get into it more and enjoy it more. Have you had your eye on it? Are you going to look to maybe grab it some point down the line?
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure at first because I, like yourself, have played all the other 4 Borderlands games and have never finished any of them because I don't know what it is, but I just can't commit to it for some reason. I would like to just blast through them all at one point to have done them, but I think you've hit the nail on the head quite a lot with kind of your experience as well. I think one thing which does struggle with those games is they're all of them, they're all very brown. And by that I mean visually bland in the environments. That's kind of the whole point. So you saying that this is very colourful and all that kind of stuff kind of makes me a bit more interested in giving this a go.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially the first one, came out around the time that just a lot of games were incredibly kind of themed around sand or like the brown kind of color palette. Back
everything
when
in the wasteland,
like definitely Gears of War was like that, or Fallout games, Spec Ops: The Line. That was that kind of era of just incredibly kind of monotonal video games in a way that Resistance, or kind of the early, I guess the early to mid kind of PS3 era. Whereas this one is just the complete opposite. You've got these kind of towering buildings, and I won't not from a narrative place won't spoil anything, but there is a point where you're kind of walking up to a castle, and then Tiny Tina will be saying things about she is kind of the architect of this game. You're not within kind of a world that develops on its own. The world is kind of at the whim of Tiny Tina's imagination. So you were walking up to this castle and she'll be just saying, right, now there's ships and now there's fire bombs, and they will just start appearing in the sky and in the sea, like to the left and above you as you're kind of wandering through this world. And it's just that aspect of not knowing what Tiny Tina is going to drop next into the world that is just, it's fantastic. Everything's kind of a surprise. You'll be going, right, well, walk up there, defeat these catapults, and she'll be like, what if you get in the catapult yourself and throw yourself over the river, and you go and do that, and there's loads of things. Those are little smatterings of kind of dressed, set dressing that she'll add into the world as in real time as you're playing it, and it just feels much more dynamic and engaging than any of the other Borderlands games did. Because you might have a singular focus, which is to kill the main boss at the last moment of the game. But everything in between that it can be a total surprise. What you're going to kind of come across next. So I highly recommend it. If it's on your radar, I'd make it something to probably go after. And funnily enough, I had the choice between Lego Star Wars and Tiny Tina's. So obviously I've now got Lego, Skywalker Saga as well. But I decided initially to go with Tiny Tina because it's a new world, it's a new story, as opposed to the Lego games, which I've seen every Star Wars film, and quite a lot of the other properties as well. So I had to pick. Am I going to play through the films I already know with Lego Star Wars, or go for something new like Tiny Tina? That's why I went for Tiny Tina. So highly recommend it. It's just not so on the nose or edgy as you might as a lot of people I think criticized it for when it first came out. I think they
Borderlands 3, my experience initially was like playing the PS5 version. It's like, oh, okay, they made some nice changes. Controller works quite well with it. I was quite enjoying it. The gunplay is pretty good, like a big jump from 1 and 2. And then, like, very early on in the story, you encounter a character who's just like stood in his underwear making a bunch of fart jokes. And I'm like, this isn't really.
Fart jokes have their time and place.
Which, yeah, I'm not against such things, but it just felt like a bit forced, and that was quite early on. Kind of made me like put it down for a bit.
Yeah, so. And I think there were obviously some characters that carried through, and Handsome Jack as a character I thought was really good. This totally nihilistic, ego-driven maniac, out for himself and nobody else. Even down to the name. But then you lost characters like, and this is spoilers. So spoiler for Tales from the Borderlands, which, as an aside, had a far better narrative than any of the other Borderlands games. That
probably the best. Well, my favorite Telltale game as well.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I absolutely loved Tales from the Borderlands. But one of the outcomes of that story is losing characters like Scooter, Scooter's Catch a Ride, who I always loved as a character, in the games, and losing him in the Tales from the Borderlands series, and obviously then he wasn't in Borderlands 3. It felt too detached from how I remembered those games being when I was younger. Because when did Borderlands 1 come out?
Originally, it was a long time ago. 2009?
Yeah, so the first Borderlands game came out in 2009, and the third Borderlands game came out in 2019. So going between those games, I went from being 15 to 25. And so maybe it got to the point where the Borderlands series just didn't click like it used to, when I was younger and first played those games. I mean, even Borderlands 2 came out in 2012. So I went from being 18 to 25 before the third one came out. And I think maybe if I had been 18, I might have found the third one amazing and incredibly funny. But I think just where I am in terms of kind of the comedy I enjoy is different at the age of 25 than it was at 18. Whereas Tiny Tina's, I just feel as like a high fantasy fanatic and fan, it really has served that so far. So yeah, I've really enjoyed that so far. We're going to talk about Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga as well, but first I want to find out what you've been playing over the past week as well, Will. What's been on your PS5? Anything new? Anything you've been really enjoying?
Not so new, but I've been playing the PS5 edition of Uncharted 4,
Ah, okay.
which is I can't even remember the title of it. Is it a Thieves?
Thieves End?
Thieves End. That sounds right.
Yeah, don't quote me on that.
Yes, a Thieves End.
Yeah.
What it is. So I played the original on PS4 when it came out. It was the only Uncharted game I've only played through one time. Apart from Golden Abyss, which was the PS Vita game. That's a different story for a different day. It's very good. So I thought I'll give it a go. I think it was a small price to pay for the upgrade, maybe £5 or something. I can't remember. And you were actually allowed to just pay the upgrade fee on top of the version in the PS Plus collection, which was nice.
Ah, okay. All right. Yes.
I think. Yeah. It looks phenomenal. It already did anyway, but now that it's upgraded to 60 FPS and like full 4K, I didn't have because I didn't have the PS4 Pro, so I only played it in regular full HD back first time around. So it's a big upgrade for me. Some of the times, especially during the sort of like cutscenes, you could swear you were just watching a film and there were actual people on the screen. Like it's so. I mean, obviously, that's down to the mocap and the actors as well they've used, but it's just it looks phenomenal.
Yeah, for a 2016 game. Yeah.
And the game itself obviously is brilliant. More of the same Uncharted, but there's a bunch of stuff added to make. For example, the climbing introduced a rope and different ways of getting up and swinging around, things like that. Combat's pretty standard Uncharted. Just turn up in a place. There's a lot of guys. I feel like it's got a bit more of a survival element to the combat because you tend to pick up a weapon and you'll run out of ammo really quickly. So you've got to move around the combat zone to pick up another weapon. So it's a bit tougher. The enemy AI is way better than previous entries. Arguably too good because they're very good at flanking you.
Yeah, I do recall.
So it's very difficult to stay in one spot and just pick off people from there because before you know it, someone's turned up behind you and they're choking you out. The dialogue and the narrative is amazing as always. Like most of the game, you'll have a companion with you, whether it changes throughout the game who that person is. I won't go into too much details for people who haven't played it yet. But the banter between yourself and whoever you're with is always pretty funny. It's not too cheesy. Story is great. There's genuine moments where you feel sad for the characters and stuff like that. And the relationships, I guess they've been built up throughout the series as well. So if you've played them all, when certain things happen, there's more impact to it. But yeah, Naughty Dog obviously very good at this kind of thing. I don't really have much more else to say. We already know, the game itself. We already know it's great, and the upgrade is very good. The upgrade edition also includes Lost Legacy. I want to say it's called, which was the add-on where you play as Chloe. All right.
Yes, yeah, Chloe along with Nadine.
Nadine,
yeah.
Clearly need some better memory to go along with. I can't remember anybody's name, even though I'm playing it right now. The Lost Legacy I haven't actually played. I never got around to it.
Okay. Yeah, I did play that.
I'm on chapter 20 of the main game at the moment, so I'll be probably wrapping it up later today or tomorrow. So next week I'll probably be able to give my thoughts on Lost Legacy as a first time I played it. Do you have any thoughts on Uncharted?
Not aside from the fact that I absolutely loved that game when it first came out. Yeah, 2016. And remember, one of those games I remember exactly kind of where I was sat at my desk with my television there, just because of how my bedroom was at the time, playing that on PS4, and just every single moment, every single chapter beginning, the Naughty Dog really have a knack for just keeping you going. My God, this is incredible. Every single time, even to the point where you almost want to go out. You want to go off outside of the game and find out all about kind of the histories and some of the kind of background on what influenced Naughty Dog in terms of the kind of the obviously more pirate themed fourth game. You want to go and find out all about these pirates and all about these secret islands and all sorts. It's a game like that where you want to expand your knowledge on kind of the topics and the themes of the game, not just within the game, that I absolutely loved. So phenomenal game. One that will always stick out as kind of among my top games of all time, alongside games like the original Last of Us, and the other ones. Specifically 2. Uncharted 2 for me was such an experience, and remains to this day. And funnily enough, I played them out of order, which I don't want to admit.
Oh,
I played
that's
the first.
A weird choice.
I played and the reason is because I always had a 360, and then I decided to get like a kind of a janky PS3, kind of the original ones. And I went out and bought. I don't know whether I can't remember the name of the store. It was an independent game store in Stockport in Greater Manchester, which does not exist anymore. Has been out of business for quite some time. But they were doing a deal where if you bought The Last of Us kind of on launch or within the first week, you got Uncharted 3 for, I think, like a £5.
Okay.
So it was like a deal, kind of a double deal, double Naughty Dog deal. And because I got that, I ended up playing The Last of Us and then Uncharted 3. Within the kind of first couple of weeks that I had that PS3. And then after time, I went back and played 2. Now 2 will stick out as absolutely being the better one. I really enjoyed 3, but Uncharted 2, every moment of that game is just incredible, meticulously designed, just an unbelievable Indiana Jones-like experience. But yeah, I originally played them out of order. I went 3 to 2, back to 2, which probably in hindsight shouldn't have done. But some of the story elements don't kind of carry over. But there are some characters that if you play 3 and weren't in 1, you kind of don't have a lot of context to their existence. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. Yeah, phenomenal game. I know that they said it was probably going to be the last one, and there are rumors over the past week that some details on the new Naughty Dog title have been leaked, and that it won't be part of the Last of Us or Uncharted series. So it will be either an entirely new IP or a Jack and Daxter remake, which I am holding out hope for. I don't think it'll happen, but I'm holding out hope for. It'll probably be another narrative-driven title, and as far as I'm aware, Neil Druckmann is not working on it. He is working on something else.
He's working on the Last of Us TV show.
Is it the TV show that he's working on? Yeah, I did see some. There was some news about, or I think a little bit of Pedro Pascal talking about how he was playing Joel in the Last of Us TV series. So we'll have to see how that turns out. But yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. So I will probably have to do the same as you and go back and get to playing it again at some point. Grab that upgrade and go from there. One other thing before I talk about Lego Star Wars is the fact that Sucker Punch announced that the latest Ghost of Tsushima patch will be the final one. So it looks like they are now fully moving on to development of whatever their next title will be. There's no official word on what that title is, what it's going to be centered around, and it likely won't be a Ghost of Tsushima 2, despite how well received that game was and how popular that game has been. But they are now wrapping up development on Ghost of Tsushima and moving on to whatever's next, which is really exciting because I absolutely loved Ghost of Tsushima. I don't know whether you've had a chance to play it yet.
And the reason is, it seems to be, along with Demon's Souls, one of the only two PS5 games which just refuses to reduce in value over time. Yeah. Because obviously it's so good.
Yes.
So
that is very true. You'll have to see if you can
buy the bullet and just get it at some point, because I do really want to play it.
Yeah, I mean, see if there's a cheaper disc version and then pay for the PS5 upgrade. I think it's... I do agree. I have been waiting to upgrade the PS4 version to the PS5 Director's Cut, which has the Iki Island expansion, but it just refuses to go less than £25. And I, for some reason, refused to pay that, even though I loved Ghost of Tsushima so much. Really love that game. I just, for some reason, don't.
You think they'd make another infamous? You know what I'm saying? Infamous game.
I don't know. Infamous. I enjoyed Infamous Second Son. It was obviously one of the first PS4 titles to kind of come along and try and prove what the console could do. And I enjoyed it. I liked the game. I liked going. That was one of the, back before I was jaded by open world games, that I went around and collected everything. And I did enjoy the First Light expansion as well.
When I first got my PS4, First Light was the free PS Plus game that month.
Oh, yeah.
So that was one of the first games I played on the console. And it's actually, just to call back to what we were talking about earlier, because even though it's clean, it's quite it's a dark, down, the city's kind of trashed and stuff.
Yeah.
But the visual, the sprite effects from the powers, so neon and look so beautiful.
Yeah.
And that was such a departure from all of my very brown PS3 games.
Yeah.
I was I remember being really wowed by it. This looks incredible, so cool.
I remember, just on a bit of a tangent, I remember when PS2 games generally didn't have a lot of particle systems. They were quite expensive to render, difficult to kind of implement in video games. And then, I don't know what the catalyst was, maybe Unreal Engine 3 or the power of the kind of, the PS4, but suddenly particle systems became really inexpensive and became a massive focus in terms of kind of new titles. So games like Infamous Second Son was absolutely riddled with particle systems because they were so cheap to do now. And that's why you had a lot of the neon effects. You had a lot of the powers that looked really good with the particle systems. I definitely remember Killzone Shadowfall. That game had a load of particle systems in it as well, because they were suddenly cheap to render and really added, kind of added a bit of flavor to a lot of these games. So that's why that game and First Light always kind of stood out, was that they were using these visual effects that just hadn't really been present during the PS3 era, and it kind of, it was a statement of, this is what the PS4 can do now. And I think it's crazy to think that Sucker Punch had 2 games in the 7 years, 6 or 7 years that the PS3, was around, PS4 was around. Obviously, it's still around and still making games for it, just due to the shortage of PS5s. But they both, one of them came at the beginning of the era, and one of them came at the end of the era. And seeing the kind of the graphical development and how things, how kind of graphics in PS4 games moved on between, Second Son and Ghost of Tsushima is kind of really interesting to see. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend Ghost of Tsushima. So the last thing that I want to talk about, as far as what I've been playing, I'll really only kind of quickly cover this, because I spoke quite a lot about Tiny Tina's, and I've not had as much time to play Skywalker Saga, but I have been playing Lego Star Wars. So far, my impressions are really good. They have overhauled a lot of the systems that became very stagnated in Lego games. It got to the point where, Lego games, I don't think there was ever a bad Lego game, but it got to the point where Lego games were only good. Kind of, they all iterated on the same format, the same design, the same kind of pulled out camera view where you control 3 characters in one go, and you go off and do things. And there, that's not to say that there weren't really good games. Lego Marvel Superheroes 2 stands out as one that was really good. The Lego Harry Potter, Lego Hobbit games, all of those were kind of good games, but the format of these games kind of got a bit tiresome after a while. And so that's why Skywalker Saga exists. It's kind of a rewriting of how these games play. And the way I'd compare it to is that God of War 3 had a more top down, kind of top down, in order to show the scale, and in order to kind of render the scale on PS2 and PS3, they made your player character a lot smaller. The camera was lifted a bit up from the character, and then they could introduce, these kind of massive scales without kind of pushing the systems too much. Then when they moved to PS4 with God of War 2018, they were able to bring the camera in closer and yet maintain the scale, just because of the rendering power. And I think that's similar to what has happened with Lego Star Wars. They've gone from this kind of pulled back top down camera view into more of a traditional third person view, where the camera is quite close behind the character. And what that's allowed for is more engaging, kind of, not necessarily complex, because they'll never be complex in a Lego game, but kind of more engaging combat systems. So more around kind of engaging with a kind of smaller number of enemies, and using your lightsaber in situations like that, rather than this kind of top down, and you might mash square a bunch until the enemies all kind of popped and died. So this is more engaging combat system that I'm really enjoying. Some of the puzzle mechanics, they've been kind of improved. There's a few more of them than there were before. Visually, it's still kind of that quirky, charming Lego look. And as far as kind of the narrative and cutscenes go, they are close to the films, but with the kind of added comedic elements, slapstick elements that you find in the Lego games. I'm only about a quarter of the way through Phantom Menace, but weirdly, it's sort of not changed my opinion on the prequels, but I am finding maybe a spot for them now that I didn't before, because when you take kind of the goofiness and the kind of cringe elements of the prequels and put them into Lego, where there's always been a lot of that kind of slapstick humor, it fits way better as a Lego game than I think it ever did as a film, which is, you know, kind of funny to say. But I've really enjoyed it. You know, I've not just been sat there going, oh my, who wrote this bit? Because it's the Lego games. They're meant to be a bit kind of fun and a bit, nonsensical at times, or a bit kind of, that sort of humor. And so I've really enjoyed it. Obviously, there's still another 8 films to go. This is a big game. You can tell that's why it took so long, and why, unfortunately, as a recent report said, that there was quite substantial crunch within the development team, and kind of the product that you get, you can tell is kind of born out of that kind of bit of that crunch, but also a lot of that dedication and passion within the team to get this game done. So I highly recommend it. I think it's really, really good. Have you had your eye on it? I know that I think you've said in the past
absolutely.
that you've been looking at it.
I just actually, while you've been talking, I've just had a trailer silently running in the background, just having a look.
Oh right, yeah.
Ridiculously good, really fun. I reckon, like, I'm watching it, and even in Lego form, I'm recognizing all the locations and characters and everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, a huge Star Wars fan. One of the first things I probably, like, as a little kid, got into. So, and it's always been there with me.
Yeah.
Even a less good Star Wars film, I'm still going to enjoy. So, to have like the whole story in a fun format, sat there, I feel like I definitely want to get stuck in.
Yeah, and
I would say my only concern is, because I've still got a couple of the previous Lego games left to finish off, Marvel Heroes 2 and the DC Villains 1.
Oh, okay, yeah.
My only concern is if the improvements in this are like so significant, it's going to make me not want to go and finish them.
I want to go back to them. Yeah. No, I think they are. Yeah, they're definitely, kind of substantial over the previous games, and they've certainly reinvigorated my enjoyment of the Lego titles. And one thing that I will say as kind of a criticism of it, The Last Jedi, the 8th one, by Rian Johnson, that film was absolutely jam-packed with far too many gags, far too many witty remarks, and very overt overt jokes that you just kind of wore thin by the end of the film. And I really that really brought down my enjoyment of that film. Was just the complete the whole film had become a running gag, whereas the 4th, 5th, and 6th films had comedic elements. Absolutely, they were funny, really funny from time to time, but it was far more subtle. It was far more kind of implicit humor.
I get the feeling that he tried to kind of, he wanted to make it funny in the same way as like a typical Marvel film is.
Yeah.
But it just didn't really land or tried too hard or something.
Yeah, exactly. The old films were really funny because of, I've got a bad feeling about this. There were the little remarks made by the characters that were just humorous in the context. So while I didn't really like The Last Jedi, I can see that slapstick gag humor working really well in Lego format. And so I think that I will probably enjoy, like with the prequels, the seventh, eighth, and ninth film more so than I did the films themselves, because that kind of humor is now Lego-fied, if you want to call it that. So I'm looking forward to getting to that stage. Gonna play some more this evening along with Tiny Tina's. So I'm pretty well sorted. I mean, I know there's a drought of video games for quite a number of months now in terms of big titles, because they've all been delayed or they're all kind of coming out in the holiday season. But I have got enough to kind of keep me going for now, I think.
Yeah, backlog season.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Right, well, yeah, that kind of covers everything I want to talk about Star Wars. Is there anything else that you've been doing over the past week? Anything else you wanted to talk about?
Actually, yes, actually. So somewhat video game related. I have been watching the TV show Mythic Quest.
Ah, okay.
And as a huge fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and obviously video games, this just seems like a perfect combination of things that I love. So I've watched just started the second season, and it's been really good. Very much enjoying it. I feel like they've tried to sort of at various points represent some of the sort of known issues within the video game industry, whether it's like having egotistical men running things, like their misogyny, that kind of stuff that we've heard about in the news over the last few years.
Yeah.
But they still manage, they bring these issues to the forefront, but also manage to keep it light enough that the show's still fun to watch. But they're not making light of those things. They're not diminishing the seriousness of those issues.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think it would have been a mistake if they just not included them, because that wouldn't be, especially they've been filming and writing this show at the same time. There's been various controversies in the industry.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be representative. I've watched all of it. I absolutely loved it, and I do agree with you. I think in a similar way, and these are the kind of parallels it has with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and that they take the kind of negative elements of kind of human behavior and push them so to the extreme that we are kind of confronted by kind of the worst things that kind of humans can be, and we kind of we laugh in the face of that, in that we can never see kind of ourselves being just that genuinely awful. And I think that's one of the reasons that It's Always Sunny has been so popular, is they are a gang of characters that are just the worst elements of human beings. They are just genuinely awful people, and putting themselves in these situations where they try and convince themselves that they're not awful, has a lot of comedic value. And I think we've seen the same in Mythic Quest, in that Iron Grim is that kind of that kind of ego driven, single visioned, generally kind of white man in his kind of mid 30s, early 40s, driving kind of video game project where he is convinced that he has the absolute vision of what this game needs to be, and that everybody has to serve him, rather than the kind of contributions coming from developers or artists or whatever. He's got an idea and he's going to kind of drive that forward. And I think in seeing that extreme, kind of you start to recognize a lot of the kind of things that need to change in kind of video games. And bringing in elements of like the script writer being this kind of old man stuck in his ways, with this kind of attitude that he clearly never moved on from the 70s and the 80s. And kind of seeing that borne out in a character brings to light a lot of the ways in which maybe some of those people in the past have been given a free pass to kind of behave as they do. And like you say, it's about not brushing it under the carpet. It wouldn't be accurate to the video game world if you didn't have these characters and have them be confronted about their behaviors in kind of the show. And so I absolutely love it as a massive fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
I think one kind of big difference to Always Sunny is that this show actually gives you a small handful of characters you can kind of root for.
Yeah.
Whereas the point of Always Sunny is just all the main characters are awful. Like there's no character in that show with a redeeming quality whatsoever. Like they're all awful, and that's the point. But you've got I'm so bad with names. She's called Poppy. Poppy.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So she's like, I'm not saying that like characters like her. They've written in, they have their flaws, which is makes them more human and everything. But overall, they are like essentially protagonists and like someone you can get behind. You want to see them succeed. And where you've got some, and then you've got Ian Grimm, which is Rob McElhenney's character. Kind of, he's very egotistical, but he does sort of go through growth during the show.
Yeah,
and then you've got Danny Fury's character, who seems to be very just outright a bad guy.
Yeah,
all he cares about is the money. He'll do anything to make money. Just selling $250,000 sword in the game is a microtransaction. He's the embodiment of like microtransaction problems. Like that's basically what his character.
He is corporate greed and like what people find bad about Activision and EA kind of distilled down into a character.
He is that character. I must say, first few episodes I struggled separating some people from the characters I've seen them play in other shows.
Yes. Like,
so I'm seeing like it's Mac and it's Abed from Community.
Yeah, and it's Cricket.
Cricket. But no, it's really good. It's really recommended.
No, absolutely. And another character that kind of you kind of root for is Ashley Birch's characters, kind of the QA tester. Her and unfortunately can't remember the name of the other actor, but they're dynamic and they're back and forth. Obviously, kind of being in a very like male-driven world and kind of how they cope with being kind of QA testers in a world that generally hasn't accepted kind of women being part of it in the past. Ashley Birch, obviously the voice actor behind Tiny Tina and Aloy. So it's good that you've got some real kind of like real video game kind of talent and creed within this show, because she obviously is a voice actor of two incredibly popular characters. So you've got somebody like that to kind of keep it grounded. You've also got again to kind of come back to some of the maybe the issues in the video game industry. You've got the absolutely kind of bumbling HR representatives or like a community manager. I think she might be, and how the kind of the disconnect between how the video game, how the development company sees the game and how the public see the game, and you've got kind of the streamer.
I mean, they've demonstrated that by having a very physical disconnect by the fact that the community manager works in the basement.
Yes,
away
exactly.
from everybody else.
Yeah,
She
exactly.
gets piles and piles of complaints.
Yeah.
Yeah, somehow she's eternally positive.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm honestly really, I was pleasantly surprised by it, because I know that when they first announced it, and I'm pretty sure they first announced it at E3 in maybe 2019, where I think Rob McElhenney actually came out on stage at might have been the Ubisoft.
Ubisoft they're involved in the production, I think.
Yes, like Ubisoft Forward or Play or whatever they call their kind of game showcase.
Which also explains why there's such an abundance of For Honor footage and
and Assassin's Creed footage.
Which is the most anybody has ever seen For Honor is during the TV.
Again, it's still supported to this day with a dedicated fan base.
Is it?
Yes, absolutely. I think they're on like season. I don't even know what season of For Honor they're on. They're still going, and the game came out in 2017, and they're on season something stupid.
Season 5. No, sorry, Year 5, Season 4.
Well, so there you go. Still chugging along. Yeah. So when they first announced it, I think there was a bit of kind of, right, well, we know that Rob McElhenney and Charlie Day, who are behind it, are really funny people. We love them in Always Sunny, but are they maybe trying to move in? We don't know about kind of Charlie Day and Rob McElhenney's, how much time they've spent with video games. Are they big video game fanatics? We expect their characters, Mac and Charlie, to probably be, just judging by the kind of characters that they are. But I think maybe there was a bit of an attitude of, they're kind of coming into this world. Are they going to be able to do, kind of an accurate portrayal of video game development? And is it going to be funny? And for a while, I decided, I'm not going to watch it. I'll probably let a second series come out, because that's generally when a show hits its stride. And then I watched it, and I absolutely loved it. And I have to say, again, like with a lot of things recently, being a bit more reserved in my expectations led to me just really enjoying it. So maybe I need to do that for everything. It clearly works. So I'm looking forward to seeing a third series. It's already been renewed for a third and a fourth.
That's good.
Yeah, and the last one came out in May of last year. So I would expect we should see a new series sometime kind of later this year, I'd expect. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a rating of 100%, which is pretty good. Pretty good going for a show that with a particularly opinionated fan base of the entertainment platform that it.
Considering it's producing conjunction with both Apple and Ubisoft, they've expected it to get review bombed just for their association with those two companies.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you'd think they'd people would just outright hate on it for the sake of it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where that show goes next. You've obviously got a second series, which I think takes it to another level as well.
Yeah, I'll be blasting through that in the next few days.
Yeah, cracking. Well, I don't think I've got anything else to talk about this week. I'm going to just get back to playing a lot of Tiny Tina's and Lego Star Wars, and just carry on really enjoying those games. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I was just seeing if there's anything releasing in the next week or two that looked interesting, but I don't think there is really, is there?
No, there's going to be a bit of a drought, I think, until after the summer, when we start getting into the next release season. And there are lots of things still yet to find out whether they're even coming out this year. We know that God of War Ragnarok was delayed from 21 to 22, and we've seen nothing since. So either they're going to pull Bethesda and say, here's God of War Ragnarok, you can go and download it today. Or it's going to get pushed into next year. Still got Starfield.
I mean, surely there's, for Ragnarok, the scope to kind of do a big reveal around, the typical E3 time of year, even though I don't think it's exactly happening.
No, E3 has been cancelled, both digitally and physically. Yeah.
So around that time, they could sort of do a big reveal with a look at like a holiday time release, right? That's
either
reasonable.
Either I'd say it holiday, or I'd say it probably around the same time that 2018 released, which was in April.
Right.
So that's the other time that I'd expect. But we've obviously got Starfield as well coming out, and
I might have a PC by then that I can play.
Yes, you can jump on board with that one. Hogwarts Legacy, which I personally am looking forward to, and then some other bits and bobs. The usual Call of Duty release that we've not actually seen anything about either, despite it being towards the end of April. Now we normally have seen at least a trailer, so it'll be interesting to see what Modern Warfare 3 2022 looks like. Interested in that one.
I get the feeling with the Call of Duty releases last couple of years, they're kind of just like, we know it's going to sell, so we don't really care.
Well, yeah, but that being said, Vanguard had a pretty troublesome time. It was one of the weakest selling Call of Duty games, and generally
not a bad selling game by any means. So.
No, relative to the juggernaut,
Call of Duty.
Sales that they usually get. So we'll have to see if we start to see over the next couple of weeks. I am hoping that we start to see more reveals, because that's the thing. If there's no releases, we normally get a lot of reveals, or vice versa. Yeah. And we're kind of not getting any reveals, and we're not getting any releases. So we'll just see what picks up. It's kind of a drought at the moment, but
we need things to talk about.
Yes, exactly.
On the podcast more than anything.
Yeah, so exactly.
They need to give us something to work with.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to start talking about things I played 20 years ago.
Yeah. Metal Gear Solid 2. That was good, wasn't it? Should we talk about that for an hour? Right. Well, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about this week. Everything from you?
Yep, I'm good.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, as usual, you can catch us next time on Tuesday at 7 p.m. UK time. If you did enjoy the episode, be sure to like, subscribe, give us a comment, give us your feedback. Be sure to reach out on Twitter at In Gaming Podcast if you've got any questions, or you want us to talk about something next week, or at any time really in the future. Yeah. So be sure to keep in touch, and we will see you next week. So it's goodbye from me.
Bye from me.
Goodbye.